In the chat first, we just want to remind everyone that we want to make sure that during our sessions, we're maintaining everyone's dignity in our community. Of course, our everyday interactions are, just as important in how we carry through things. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to turn on closed captions for us now, so our session is accessible. But if there's, we all should, as we think about these issues, consider our own positionalities, where we sit in the world, how that relates to power, and reflect as we need to, right, throughout this, and always be reflective. And we need critical friends to help us through and ask tough questions. So we just want to emphasize that. The other thing is one last plug we're making here. If you consider yourself a critical educator or a critical tech educator, someone who has a critical tech consciousness, we are doing a study where we're trying to learn, how do people get there? If we're going to educate students and figure out how to educate students towards these types of outcomes and dispositions, we want to know how other people in our community, people that we know, people that are doing this work, came to hold critical views about technology. So that's it. So we have that. That would really mean a lot to us. In the coming days, if you've not already subscribed to our newsletter, or that's where you can kind of keep up to date with what we're doing, we'll have a conference, rundown and review after. So with that, we want to announce and welcome our keynote closer, I guess we'll say, bringing in our closer for the conference. A little bit of a baseball reference there, Dr. Roxana Marashi. So thank you so much for joining us today. We've got a little bit of I've got a little bio to read here, but you can read even more online. You're a professor of education at San Jose State University, where you teach courses in the Department of Teacher Education and the doctoral program in educational leadership. Your research publications have focused on evaluations of policies and programs related to school violence prevention, high stakes testing, privatization, and technologization of teaching and learning. Dr. Marachi is an active member of our community, often participating in our monthly tech talks, and we're excited to hear more from you. You're probably the first member to come out of our community to give a keynote. So we're so excited. So we're going to turn the mic over to you.
Thank you so much. I want to start with a note of gratitude, echoing how Marie had started. For the entire Civics of Tech community, thank you for bringing this conference together. Thank you for connecting everyone, to all of the panelists, all the folks who've participated in the sessions last year, this year. I mean, this is really exciting work. I'm inspired and I'm grateful to be connected and to have an opportunity to share. I'll go ahead and start with my slides here, which I will make available publicly as well. Before I do any kind of a talk, I become accustomed to needing to do the academic freedom disclaimer that my views here, those are mine. They're not necessarily those of my university or the CSU or anything. So we're gonna do that and get that out of the way. I want to start with this. I'd like to start from this place in my heart, with an image of vibrancy, life, and art. The city of San Jose I call home, a city of culture, a city I roam. The Valley of Hearts delight from above. It now powers tech, the city I love. Silicon Valley with its giant tech coffers. Who knows what the cost of the next venture offers? The bust of this SVB bank and its scams, with false valuations, its wolves and its lambs. They move fast and break things across neighborhoods and drives, pushing AI-based hype to every nook of our lives. The full court press, this mess we explore, its manifest destiny into our minds and more. I've grappled with how best to approach this hour, to be inspiring yet truthful, to peel back the power. Foundations, philanthropies, claiming care for the needy, while laying tech traps to serve the greedy. So now for the talk about breaking free from the blockchaining of babies and babies to be. These issues cross over. There's no left and no right. When blockchains are tethered, we'll all lose sight. Locked in past data, impossible to delete. Living lives on tech ledgers with glitches replete. Let's be wise and alert, human and aware. See how our empathy is being twisted and ensnared in marketing pitches and flashy slide decks toward tech resignation and oh, what the hex. Let's see past the illusions, the crypto, the parties. It's the data they want. It won't make us smarties. So my hope is to spell out the next exploitation, so we may steer clear for the next generation. I'm gonna take a minute to pause here. I wanted to start again with some art and this beautiful mural. The author is Jim Miner. It says over here, Vida Abundante. Sharing this with permission from the photographer who took this photo. And it's, I just love the beauty of this cornucopia of this fall harvest and what Silicon Valley used to be called the Valley of Heart's Delight. And now, of course, it's known as Silicon Valley and the tech capital of the world. But there are these beautiful murals all across the city. Encourage you to check out the links and some of the other art. And I wanted to, let me see if I can go to the next slide here. It's not allowing me to go forward. Okay, let me do this. So I wanted to contrast this with this image of the Silicon Valley billionaires remaking America's schools. And this is something I've witnessed from a front row seat this last, I would say, well, 15 years, but like the last decade, almost decade and a half. And I want to start with some of the research shifts that I've experienced that maybe some of you may be able to relate to. In the ways that your thinking changes over time. I had to do this. It's been a difficult shift. And I want to just share this for anyone who may also be listening and thinking, oh my goodness, this thing that I was really excited about is something different than I thought it was. When I started in research, it was 25 years ago as a graduate student, and it was at the time that Columbine had, the shooting in Columbine had happened, and there was a push for evaluation of programs for school violence prevention, bullying prevention. I wanted to know if schools are going to be investing in these things, which ones work. So we did evaluation of research on school climate, bullying prevention, social emotional learning, etc. And I got excited by the social emotional learning part initially because I thought, what better way to humanize education than to encourage perspective taking and relationship skills and empathy and all the things that we want to encourage in addition to, right, the curriculum. And it was a humbling and sobering journey to realize that it's not that was just part of the picture. That was what got me excited as an academic to champion this, because there's more to social emotional learning. It is actually a much bigger picture. There's a behavioral data grab happening at the back end of this movement, and you cannot separate the two now. Right? And so we want that good empathy care in our schools. That's the good part, right? And now we have to recognize that it's coming tethered with a data grab, with behavioral data at the back end. And as I started to learn, and thanks to other, colleagues, researchers who are having these critical lenses and writing and speaking about these things, that there's a much bigger picture. There's a lot more happening. There's philanthropies, foundations, it's global. There's a lot we have to really unpack with the power and privilege and who is actually pushing a lot of these kinds of things. And so SEL was sort of like this segue where I started to see, as children start to spend more time on their screens, and there was an emphasis on social emotional learning, I thought, well, what do the screens do? How is this going to affect their long-term health and development? And as I started to peel back these layers, I saw there's parallel trends of privatization of the social impact finance sector, of pay for success programs as our public budgets are dwindling. And what I'm seeing recently as being called Cradle-to-Career data systems, with what is having blockchain at the back end of them, but we don't hear about this blockchain. There isn't enough conversation, I think, yet about blockchain in education. And this is why I wanted to introduce this to our group of critical scholars. I have a lot of slides here. I'm going to go quickly and I will provide them later, but I just wanted to show some visually compelling images to show the strength of the power in finance and funding of Silicon Valley. These are the big tech organizations, as you're aware, and just in the last 15 years, look at the market cap growth. There's a lot of these that, are the foundation of what we're seeing. Global Silicon Valley is something that I have been following for a really long time because I noticed, and a colleague had sent to me over a decade ago, a report that it was a manifesto that they had published on July 4th, Independence Day in 2012, to basically push tech into schools. This is some of the current website of today's screenshots of Global Silicon Valley, and you see the the nod to Orwell, right? The brave new world, powering pioneers, growth investment, philanthropist investors, disruptors, etc. Here we have Michael Moe, who was the author of that 2012 piece, who's also was vice chair of Center for Education Reform, which was pushing a lot of the online and charter school movement. And so this is what we have. This is what we're swimming in Silicon Valley, and that is actually going out into the rest of the world, especially in the education space. The ASU-GSV Summit is happening on a yearly basis. I think it's year 13 or 14 now. And you notice the language here, changing the world for good. You're going to hear this language as they sell these things. By the way, predatory tech will not come labeled as predatory tech. It's not going to say, we want your data at the back end. It's going to say, we're doing this for the social good. So this report that I had mentioned really offers some important clues about what's coming, not even like things that we haven't even seen yet. So I encourage folks to dig into it because it's something to behold. Over 300 pages, market analyses by sector, from pre-K as the fastest growing to K-12 to the unbundling of higher ed, which is what we're seeing right now with the micro-credentials and the badges and all of these little things that are trying to chop up higher ed into pieces and privatize it. So they also published a follow-up in 2012, which and both of these documents have a lot of parallels connecting the education field and sector to the health field and health tech sector. Those are some parallels that I see now are going to be combining the data at the back end. So what are some of the one troubling thing that I saw in this report was that their strategic battle plan, and this is their language, not mine, included a key goal to eliminate locally elected school boards. That should be deeply troubling to all of us. That is an erosion of democracy, right? There was a detailed technological takeover of education markets with, sorry, I'm gonna have to move something on my screen here, with privatization via ed tech, charter schools, unbundling of higher education as key routes of entry. I have some screenshots for those who want the original source documents here. Kind of enlarged these because it's difficult to see, but this was a 15-year plan from 2012 to 2027, ultimately wanting open online campuses. Let's do away with the need for our brick and mortar schools. So let's go ahead and see how did this happen, because it's still happening. This is a process called vertical integration, where you have an entity that has tremendous power, financial power. This happened, by the way, with Purdue Pharma, the Sacklers, and where they were also the same ones that were doing the publishing, that were doing the dissemination, the media. And so there was this kind of vertical power shift in terms of shaping our beliefs about this thing and the ways that people behave at the back end. The bottom here is the ASU-GSV Summit. Many of you probably heard of it. Look at the power there. 500 learning and workforce tech CEOs. This was their last kind of boasting of over $5 trillion in assets. I think the last part might have, that screenshot earlier might have said $7 trillion. Tremendous amount of both data and profit heist in education happening. Well, these bankers and investors and entrepreneurs can't do it all, right? They need somebody to push this tech into the schools, and that's where the Philanthropy Roundtable came in. Philanthropy Roundtable was formerly chaired by Betsy DeVos. Again, a lot of folks wanting to privatize education, and they're going straight to the places where the impact is going to be felt the most, and that are the easiest to be able to push the tech in without pushback. And so you see a lot of the case studies, and what's being focused on here is primarily in low-income areas, Black and Latino communities, where there's a lot of need for additional supports and things like that. Unfortunately, they acknowledge here that there's a lack of research. They do not have good research that this is even working. But then in the very last chapter, it's dozens and dozens of strategies for how to continue to push it in. And for many of you, you may see these same patterns now. The tech is being deployed with no research on effectiveness, and it's doing harm, and then it's too late. By the time we realize that it's doing harm, it's already done the harm. Brief example of this in Detroit with the Buzz program. This is an investigative piece by Kurt Guyette, who won an award for this unpacking what happened with the problems with the software technology. And at the same time, what was not working on the ground ended up being lauded as a success by a tech-mediated, tech-funded nonprofit pushing, celebrating all the tech in schools. So we have to be aware of the messaging and what we may not know at the back end of what these things are that are being promoted. This is a bit from a chapter that a colleague, Rob Carpenter, and I had written a few years ago, Silicon Valley Philanthrocapitalism, Policy Shifts from Teachers to Tech. We do a deep dive into both of these organizations, GSV and the Philanthropy Roundtable. And we start to allude to the concerns about the social impact sector as well. Ultimately, what we see is a fundamental mismatch. It's a repeated mismatch between the marketing hype and the reality. We've seen this in so many reports. Dr. Pangrazio yesterday had an awesome keynote where she also highlighted some of the more recent reports around the privacy issues and Center for Democracy and Technology, and some of the more kind of robust documentation around many of these harms. And this is continuing today, right? We see the markup did a number of exposés on ed tech programs that were being scooped up by a private equity firm, Vista Equity Partners, from pre-K all the way up into higher ed, with millions of children being ensnared in the data grabs. This is a screenshot of a program that was previously called Who Knew It? That's the pronunciation of it, Who Knew It? And it was an early warning solution that was rolled out in Santa Clara County under this data zone project that had connections to CZI funding, boasting about 900,000 students in this database with over 300 variables. Was very concerned about the predictive analytics. This is a screenshot I took from a promotional video that now has been scrubbed, is erased, doesn't exist on YouTube. Who Knew It was then bought by PowerSchool. This same PowerSchool here that was, put in this expose. And so it's concerning, this buying and selling of all these companies. They can say, we won't share your data, we won't sell your data, but they can sell the companies, and then the data go with those companies. In San Jose, I also had served for several years on the Digital Privacy Advisory Task Force. I resigned last year because of the ignoring of our community concerns around much of the surveillance tech that was rolling out. And as I noticed the contracts, was of another contract that I was looking at, I thought, what's the predictive policing platform? And I looked up and saw that it was TriTech, and I wondered who owns TriTech. And sure enough, Vista Equity Partners, the same private equity firm that owns all of that ed tech data, is the same one that is apparently, owning this company. Now, that contract was recently canceled, my understanding, but still they have this data, and it should lead all of us to ask in our own communities, who has access to the data, to the longitudinal data? Where are these predictions for predictive policing coming from? And how can we be more critical of the marketing that's being pushed, again, in the name of safety and smartness and doing right? There's also a nod here to the integration with healthcare businesses as well. So that's just another red flag. Of course, we know this is not going to make us safer or smarter. There's going to be a lot of harms tethered to these predictions and long-term valuations when there's past data with past biases being baked into these predictive algorithms. Some might ask, well, what about FERPA to protect student data privacy? This is basically toothless. FERPA is the Family Educational Rights Protection Act, and there's a loophole that allows ed tech companies to be deemed a school official and to get access to any of the data that a school official would have. One of the concerning trends that I saw during the pandemic was that many of the testing companies had partnerships with blockchain-based reporting companies that also were given this FERPA loophole. And so you would have a health tech company with access to student information. This is just another thing I think should be explored. As we keep going, Student Privacy Pledge is basically what a lot of these companies will promise to say, don't worry, we're going to be good with your data. And ultimately what it is nothing more than a pinky promise that can be very easily broken and often is. Colleague and I have called this the apology model of data extraction. What they're basically collecting as much data as possible. And then if there's an outcry, they walk back the most egregious policies. This is happening obviously on a global scale at this point. For folks who may not have been aware, Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI and all the ChatGPT that's coming into our classrooms, also had launched this crypto WorldCoin program to biometrically scan people's eyeballs in the name of providing digital identity and supporting those in need. And it's been really problematic. This is an article about just how angry people are that promises weren't fulfilled and they feel like they've been robbed, basically. This is just as of 2 days ago, Kenya suspended WorldCoin. So there's some, glimmers of hope of like people are waking up and saying, no, you don't take these data from our communities. And so I'm hopeful that there's going to be more people and organizations and governments saying no to some of this predatory tech. Lots of different aspects of this coming into schools. Many of you have researched and presented on these things. Learning management systems. There's admitting to doing artificial intelligence and behavioral economics with nudge experiments on children. Virtual reality, ton of metadata being taken there, facial recognition and AI, so many problems. So I feel like I'm telling people what they already know here. I'm going to go quickly. But so what's the future of education? Who's going to shape the future of education? Because what I just described is difficult to sit with. There's a lot that's wrong with that massive data heist. My concern is that the next level, what people are going to say, well, just don't go to your public schools, don't do this, just learn anytime, anywhere, and you're going to have it on a secure wallet or app. That is actually a worse trap. And this is what I see happening, rumbling in these proposals for the future of education. This is a slide from the Knowledge Works, which is one of the organizations that's been instrumental in pushing for competency-based assessments in education and these anytime, anywhere approaches to learning. On the surface, it's great, just like SEL was to me 15 years ago, right? But we have to look at the back end. If we zoom out on some of the language here, learners and families will create individualized learning playlists. So this is about online modules and playlists. The learning playlist might include public schools, but could also include a wide variety of digitally mediated or place-based learning experiences. We're seeing some of these apps also be tethered to location tracking. Getting kids out to play in the park is a great thing, but if you're going to measure how far they're running and then say, oh, this was impact, that's actually really problematic. All right. So what's the newest type among these emerging technologies? Blockchain digital ID systems. Let's start with a reality check about this tech. Last year in June, over 1,500 technologists and computer scientists signed a letter to Congress documenting the very serious structural problems with blockchain-based systems. It was a scathing critique, and yet it's rolling out. It's been rolling out, and it continues to roll out. These are some screenshots from a couple of years ago, and this one on the left here is a great analysis of the problems of blockchain data systems with medical data. And some of the highlights of that are that blockchain undermines the fair information practices principle of participation. It contradicts the foundational concept of the information life cycle management, and it prevents the fair information practice principles of openness. It basically doesn't allow for consent, for people to know that their data are being stored in this way. I'm going to keep going here. What is blockchain? This is basically a digital distributed ledger that keeps a permanent record of all transactions that take place across a peer-to-peer computer network. You can think of it like a bank account where you can add funds or you can delete funds, but you can't delete the transaction ledger. And so this is what's being pitched in a lot of different sectors. I'll show, actually, before I do this one, I was going to go to another one. Sorry, I should have done the slides a little differently. But we'll get to one where, they're saying we're going to keep the produce on your table is going to be safe. We're going to track the produce. And so, let's track, people now as well. And I think it's just a really problematic parallel to make. So just want to draw that distinction that blockchain for supply chain on like products, okay. But what I'm concerned about, and I think we should all be concerned about, is blockchain tracking people. And this is why. In Ethiopia, there's a blockchain pilot. Cardano Atala Prison is a blockchain company. The CEO is Charles Hoskinson. And this is a video of him. It's a promotional speech that he's giving to highlight all these, like what are the intended benefits. I've actually transcribed it here, but what you see at the end of what he says, and I'm looking at the clock and realizing I still have a lot to share about, and so I'm actually not going to play it like I thought I was going to. But it's a lifelong ledger. He's saying the system could be used for, look at all of this, right? Property, for payments, for voting, for all other matters of their economic life, to verify credentials, to verify certificates, and then who are credible actors. And at the end, he says, who have earned the right to have a job, right? So this system, this blockchain digital ledger system, is going to follow a kid from birth to career. And my question is, just like with Shoshana Zuboff's question of, who decides who's going to be considered worthy of having a job or not? We have to really ask these very critical questions. First blockchain baby born in Tanzania. We have a couple of years later here in a blockchain for vital records being rolled out in Ohio. Look at the name of this company. Parent company, Onum. We're going to own them, okay? Vital Chain. This is with Ohio's Metro Health System, which also has a partnership with IBM, and IBM is also another one of the very large companies that's put a lot of their eggs into the blockchain basket. And this was what I was referring to earlier. I went to a conference on blockchain in education West. It was like the West Coast Conference. This was 2018 or 19. And they were again trying to make this parallel that, in the same way that we can make sure that the head of lettuce is safe on your table, we can do the same to make sure that, your child is going to be tracked and safe, throughout. It was this really bizarre and deeply troubling parallel that they were making. And so what are we really doing when we're putting children on blockchain? What is that about? And how is the social impact finance sector involved in the rollout of this? I think I'm like halfway done, and I think I have like 10 minutes left. So I'm gonna go quickly. Smart contracts on blockchain are poised to tokenize social impact data into profits for investors. The big picture is that these blockchain systems are being used at the back end of contracts that are being made in public and private partnerships in the name of doing, public services. And so the main concern about this is, again, that these are undeletable data. You cannot delete what has been in the blockchain in the past. And so if you can think of any kind of false information or anything that you may have done back when you were 12 that you didn't want to be recorded on a blockchain, this is very concerning. Colleague Martin Carnoy and I had been invited to write this policy brief on investing for impact or investing for profit on the social impact bonds. And we did describe at the end some of the concerns and did mention that blockchain is one of the emerging technologies that appears to be rolling out in some of these social impact bonds. The big picture is basically we are under investing in public services. And then when there's a need, to fund, there's a nonprofit that comes in with a solution. We want obviously to pay for something that works, right? An intermediary would monitor this project and make sure it's being done right. But a banker, an investor is coming in financing the solution, Goldman Sachs, $6 million, bringing it on in. The nonprofit does the work, an independent evaluator measures the result, but those measurements could be predetermined to be very easy to meet. And so if it's pay for success and those metrics are met, the investor gets their money back. They get the $6 million back from the government, and they get a return on investment because they're saying, oh, look, we helped prevent young children from going into special ed, or whatever the claim they want to make is. It's deeply problematic because there's a twisting of the research. There's pressure for the research to show impact when sometimes it may not. And then there's basically paying and putting children as the vehicles for investment profits. Here we go. Human capital is at the back end of this, and there are so many of these public service partnerships that are now in this space with really slick, snazzy marketing, making it sound like this partnership is going to be a great thing. We have to ask the questions: is there blockchain at the back end? How can our community members opt out and still get the services? That's what we need to be really advocating for. How's it going to look in education and public service? I'm going to take a look at the time right now. I think good. Okay. It's coming in really silent ways. So through the authentication of degrees and certificates, we see badges and micro-credentials and stackable credentials as proof of skills. This is all like the bricks being laid at the back end of a much bigger picture. Student identity verification. On its own, it sounds great, right? Yeah, we want to know if someone says they are who they say they are. So each of these piece by piece, super great. But then once they start to piece it all together and they want to put it on a wallet, we really have to wonder who's going to have access to all of that. Tokens as reward for task completion. The gaming sector is larger now than the music and the film sector. So gaming, digital labor, you're going to start to see all the esports and this really excitement around all of these new kinds of things. And then payments via cryptocurrency, obviously, if the fintech space is deeply invested in getting people on blockchain. This is a slide thanks to Alison McDowell, who's one of my research colleagues, and I've learned so much from her. She's in Philadelphia, and we've been working on trying to piece together a lot of these projects and the funding behind what's happening. And she's mapped out the various different kinds of impact projects that you might see in communities. And again, it's cost offsets, it's going to profit the investors, and there's going to be data at the back end. This is sort of just, again, the process, and it's gaming the system. It's basically gambling with our communities, and it's basically guaranteed profits for the investors. Here's another slide from a few years ago where, again, the pre-K space is just completely saturated with a lot of this work. I'm gonna take a breath. All right. So this is the slide. This is the one. Cradle to Career. It's one slide out of a much larger slide deck. This version that I have posted here is from about a year ago. Author is Greg Nadeau. You've probably seen the disclaimers on each one of my slides. This is not my slide. I do not endorse this. I want to share it so that people are aware of what is being proposed and is being rolled out. The intent is to put lifelong learning records on a digital wallet. This is through the Internet of Education, the Web3 space, decentralizing, and a lot of the blockchain-based data systems. You see a baby here, an infant, and just last year in California, a law was passed to allow birth certificates to be put on blockchain. There's going to be an effort to put birth certificates, health data, vaccinations, pre-K data, like all of the educational and the behavioral data, and then into the education, the credentials for education, but then into people's careers as well. And so here you see it says Loretta's lifelong journey. She transfers her records to a private wallet when she turns 18. And that suggests that it's on a public wallet before. We have to ask very serious questions about what is being built here. And is this going to help or is this going to hurt? Is this going to be a lifelong chain that is going to be carried forward, that is never going to be able to be broken? It's really, I'm sorry that this is like, I wanted it to be inspiring, but I just really want people to open their eyes to see what is happening. And this is where, again, the social, emotional, collaborative functions, online learning, all this measurement that's happening in schools is to try to get these portable, stackable digital credentials. Let's undo grading. Don't worry about the teacher doing the grading. No, that's biased. We have to let the computer do the grading instead, is sort of the language. And just do this online module and then do it at your own pace, right? That's the sell. And so then they can say, you can do this skill and this portfolio of these digital skills is then going to be more attractive to the corporate person that you want to be hired by. This is the narrative. I called up, I had a conversation last year with Greg Nadeau, the author of that Cradle-to-Career slide, and asked if this was already in place or is it aspirational. He said it is early stages. So there's been 14 states so far that are building and rolling this out. It's through this Workforce Innovation Network, through the National Governors Association. You may recognize that's the same organization that pushed out the Common Core standards. The US Chamber of Commerce Foundation is also extremely connected to this initiative. This is the business sector. They're very interested in having chopped up little, certificates of what are your skills, right? To be able to then hire those that they think, are going to have those skills. And this is what it looks like. Again, same language here, AI-based, blockchain, and others to create an open, decentralized, public-private data ecosystem. One of the other problems with it not being able to be deleted is that when it's on a public blockchain, it's also going to be open to all. So there's not going to be any privacy. It is the opposite of what they're saying when they say that this is going to be private. Again, it's going to be seamless sharing of data throughout a person's education and career pathway. It's going to look like Carnegie Foundation. A lot of these, foundations are pouring money into this. So you're going to see competency-based assessments. This was the ASU-GSV conference, again, Global Silicon Valley from before. And they're talking about how they're going to roll this out. And to listen to the clip I was just going to play, the language is there. It's about lifelong records and human capital. It's really something that gives us pause. This is a promotional video from the European Blockchain Services infrastructure, and it just makes, it's basically going through this very quick, like, you can apply for this, and then you can apply for this, and now you got your degree, and it's almost just a little too fast as far as, blockchain being this solution. I'm going to go quickly because I do have a lot more slides. Sorry, and there's the theme music that doesn't change either. You're going to be hearing about these things, and I think It's the double speak, right? You're going to hear these being pitched as AI for good, disruption for good, blockchain for good. And who wants to go against something for good, right? And so then when you speak up about it, like, oh, you must not care about humanity, there's this psychological manipulation happening with the language and the promotion of these things. I'm sure many of you have probably experienced as you've been trying to resist or push back on some of these. But so this blockchain is steeped in this same kind of language of blockchain for social impact. It's heavily connected to the Sustainable Development Goals with the UN. Blockchain solutions apply to all of these so-called solutions, financial inclusion, identity and vulnerable populations. Again, at a policy conference that I spoke at last September, there was a repeated theme of what was being called predatory inclusion. And it's the same as the subprime mortgage industry, and where, you know, there's a legitimate need for additional funds of some kind, but then the solution is actually a trap that's going to make things worse for the people who are ensnared in it. And so I just want people to be aware that when the UN comes and says, oh, look at all these wonderful goals, and this, yeah, of course, on the surface, we want all of those goals, but the methods by which they're putting forth solutions to get there are deeply problematic. We have to interrogate those technological solutions that are coming at the end. And we also have to ask, are these actually effective or not? Or are they surface level, band-aids to address these deeply vexing societal issues? Again, you're going to see a lot of the language from the fintech space, NFTs, decentralized futures. I share these screenshots to show you just how vast this is. I'm going to invite colleagues who would want to do a deep dive into this space. I would love to have some other folks in academia exploring and just really trying to peel back the layers of this. It's quite shocking. If there was one link on this entire 80 slide deck, I would say, check this one out. It's this, actually, learningeconomy.io, because it is this promoted app digital wallet that's going to store all of the information from the learning in all of these different sectors. And you'll see some of how the power and the finance and the folks involved, that ASU video that you saw on blockchain and credentialing, included one of the folks who was involved in this learning economy Learn Card app. These are some of the partners. You're going to recognize some of these names: Digital Promise, Desire to Learn, IBM, AWS, American Council on Education. And again, there's the learning economy. This is what I meant when I was saying that they're going to push this through policies related to competency-based education. It's going to sound great on the surface. It's blockchain at the back end. And here's another slide of the US Department of Education having plans to put blockchain-based solutions to simplify data sharing. So this is really where we're at. I had to get some advice from a friend, and I think that this is really just, no, we should not be doing this, right? This is how I feel about a lot of the things that are rolling out. And I didn't really know how to do a GIF, like embed it, so I actually just recorded it. But this is where it came from, actually. It was our friend Hypervisible, Chris Gilliard, asked to respond with a GIF to this, DNA being given, the DNA tests being given away, as a tax breaks. That just goes to a whole nother space of what we should be concerned about around the genomics of education. Big picture, what I'm concerned about, obviously, and these are bigger problems than any one of us can tackle, but I do think the awareness is extremely important, that we recognize that this is a capture. It's a privatization of our public services and education through this third sector, social impact, and blockchain at the back end. It's a privatization of our evaluation research. So no longer having university researchers do this. It's going to be a nonprofit research arm that isn't bound by IRB guidelines or ethical protections for participants. It's going to be privatized research. And then you have false privacy protection narratives. Own your own data. This is how it's going to be sold to you. Solutions led by the tech industry. A lot of the blockchain companies I've seen, they're saying, oh, big tech is awful and big tech is like horrible. Come join us. Blockchain's big tech too, everyone. They're not, it's no different. This is the same crew that been here now for 15 years. I can tell you it's the same vendors. It's the same people who started the web. So 3 layers of exploitation. It's democracy, it's dollars, and data. And this is sort of a visual that I tried to show the layers of it. There's social impact investing that's really allowing at the surface, right? Social impact, and this is going to be good impact data. We need this. But this is what's at the back end. The last few slides, I wanted to just offer an invitation for critical thinking among our academics. We are in institutions that are funded heavily by these proposals to do ethical AI, because it sounds better to do it ethically than to do it unethically, but it's still massive theft with no consent. So there's a lot of articles that I think we can look to start asking critical questions about how we can be better in academia and not get tethered to some of these shiny, grants and objects. It's really challenging, I have to say. This is probably one of the most difficult structural aspects of it, because they will often fund early career investigators who are wanting and needing to get publications, and those grants are valued. But this is part of when we say systemic racism. This is actually one of the roots that we have to also interrogate. I want to give a shout out to Timnit Gebru, who's one of my heroes. Timnit Gebru, Benjamin, Joy Boalamwini. I've learned so much from the critical text scholars who are loudly speaking out and with concern about these things. And I appreciate her work here, calling out effective altruism. That's the same social impact sector we're talking about. They're pushing this dangerous brand of AI safety. So I just wanted to offer that as a nod of respect to a lot of folks who have done this work. And there's so many more I could add. I'm going to kind of end with this, just like recognize the marketing. You're going to be told you're going to own your own data. You may own your own data, but there's going to be a lot of other people who, the rest of the public blockchain is also going to own your own data. So understand the technology that we're signing up for. We really have to ask these critical questions. The NAACP has done a lot of work in trying to raise awareness around these issues. There was a resolution that passed at the California state level and national level in 2019, opposing blockchain-based digital ID systems. I've taken some screenshots of it here, and I have a link there for folks who wanted to refer to those. If you are in a community where you're seeing a heavy push for blockchain-based quote solutions, or you want to just ask the questions, this might be a way to open the conversation among folks who also are invested in caring for our communities. So I want to close with this question of, is this tech, is this policy, is this curricula, is this practice, is it humanizing or dehumanizing education? What can we do? We can connect, we can collaborate, we can educate. We can read, write, and speak out and speak up. Just like in the earlier session, I appreciated so much the plenary panel this morning, all the speakers and the coordinators. We can resist and organize. We can leverage connections through colleagues and networks. The Parent Coalition for Student Privacy, Fair Play, has a Screens in Schools group, teachers who are concerned about this tech. There's a wonderful group of folks there. Learned today from Marika Peppercorn of the No Criminalizing Tech in Education group. Student Data Privacy Project is a group of parents that have been doing FOIA requests on the ed tech. And there's a culturally sustaining data use subcommittee at AERA that I'm also a part of. And we have a call to action with critical questions about the data governance and privacy and some of these emerging technologies. I want to invite any other educators and academics who are listening right now who would also be interested to join in this kind of a call for action maybe in the next session we could talk a little bit about it, but at least getting some interest. Continue asking the critical questions and share resources with critical perspectives. I have put together a list of resources for folks who would be interested. I try to continually update it. Obviously it's a tsunami of like an onslaught of new things to add, but I will add whatever you think may be useful. And that's it. Stay human, everyone. Thank you, and I'll be glad to take any questions if there's time. It doesn't look like there's time. I see that there's 50 chats that I missed. So that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it would be great if there are questions. Mostly the chat's been comments, Roxana,
Okay.
just like supportive and
Okay.
links and things like that. So if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask now, though, that would be great. And then at 3, when this is finished, we'll stop recording, and then we'll use the same room for just a little
Okay.
debrief and check in if folks want to do that.
Great. Thank you. Oh, I'm looking at the chat and it's super interesting. Oh, Allison, go ahead.
Yeah, while we have like a group of people all together, I'm just curious, like within the larger group, Roxana, like how many people who are coming into this space with like a familiarity of Web3 beyond crypto? And it's maybe less for you, but maybe other people who have chimed in. Is this something that people have heard of before? Is this totally new territory? We've sort of been digging in, you and I, for the last, deeply, like 3 or 4 years.
Right.
But I'm just like to take the temperature of the room. Do people have thoughts? This is like old hat, totally new?
Great question.
In a different
Anyone
context.
else want to chime in? That's a question for the audience more than me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah, thanks. New to me. I mean, yes, recordings will be, yes. Be curious to know if does anyone else want to chime in or?
Totally new.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. This is not on my radar whatsoever. I feel like my mind has been blown a little bit and I'm reeling in a very thought-provoking, inspirationally.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Kaylee. And I want to highlight your important work. The dissertation that you just wrote on the cool optimism of, finish the title for me.
Cool. The pyramid scheme, the teacher ambassador programs is pyramid scheme. Sorry, long day.
No, but what I appreciate about your work is that you are writing about your realization as a teacher, as you were a teacher ambassador in one of these programs, like what you were part of and what you were building. You realized it as you were in it, and that is very much how I have felt. And it's been extremely difficult to be immersed in spaces where I have to question, holy, wait a second, what are we actually building here? What am I contributing to? And it's like an ethical dilemma all the time. And so I just want to say that, I struggle with whether to speak out and speak up about these things, because it's not easy. You don't want to like tell a colleague, by the way, it was great that you did this, but I think unless we all come together and we figure out what is it that we're building, we may be building something that we do not want, that our community is actually going to be harmed by. And that's where I'm trying to bring these difficult conversations to this amazing group of people that already have this critical lens. I've been so excited to share today because it's the audience. This is the audience of like people who are thinking critically already. So anyway, I just want to honor the great colleagues that are doing this work. And thank you. Your work inspires my own as well. So I could list so many names. Kaylee, you're one of them. Actually, you may not know. We've never talked before, but you're one. Molly Esquivel, the folks at the CivicsOfTech, Charles. I mean, it's amazing, the folks. Anyways, so that's it. Should we? It's 11:59.
Yeah, that was a perfect wrap up. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing. One of the reasons that we invited Dr. Marishi to be a keynote is because we had a tech, one of our tech talks, and she shared all this, and we were like, oh no, this is vast new information that's really important. So if you're interested in finding more, we hold monthly tech talks. That's like the next way to keep this going. Please feel free to sign up for those as well on our website. And thank you all for attending. Thank you, Dr. Marishi.